25 years, your mother has told you that a deceased man who is listed on your birth certificate is your biological father. Edwards is claiming he is your biological father. Otis Hawkins, who you claim was shot and killed, is in fact your daughter's biological father. Claim that you and Miss Ewing were still in a sexual relationship at the time her daughter was conceived. Miss Casey's biological father.
Yes, Your Honor.
What has it been like to spend your life without a father?
Actually, it's been hell. Not knowing where I came from.
The courtroom fills with a tense, restless energy as Judge Lauren Lake begins examining a complicated paternity dispute that has pulled multiple families into a storm of old secrets, broken trust, and unexpected revelations. The people present all carry heavy emotional histories, and the courtroom atmosphere reflects that weight. On one side, the daughter stands with years of loneliness carved into her expression. She has spent her entire life believing that her father was dead, based entirely on what her mother told her since childhood. She had no photographs, no memories, and no understanding of where she truly came from. What she had instead was a birth certificate listing a man she never met, a man she believed to be gone. Her mother sits beside her but carries her own version of the story, insisting that everything she told her daughter was based on what she herself had heard. For her, the courtroom becomes a confrontation with her past choices, choices that shaped her daughter's life and emotional world. And now, facing Judge Lauren Lake, she must revisit those memories while simultaneously being challenged about their accuracy. Another man sits nearby, someone who has come forward believing he may be the daughter's biological father. He claims that he and the mother were in a relationship at the time of conception, and that he always suspected he had another child. For him, this moment represents the chance to either confirm a long-held belief or let go of a hope he has carried for many years. His presence introduces emotional layers tied not only to his desire to know the truth, but also to the complicated relationship between law and justice. The law will determine paternity through scientific evidence, but the emotional consequences, including acceptance, regret, or healing, fall into the realm of justice, which is often more complex. Judge Lauren Lake guides the proceedings with firmness and compassion. She is accustomed to hearing people describe how fear, betrayal, or misinformation altered the course of their lives. The courtroom becomes a space where stories of abandonment, confusion, and longing mix with the legal tools used to uncover truth. The tone feels similar to the kind of emotional unraveling heard in deep, reflective podcasts, such as cheating stories, adoption stories, full episodes, and even discussions similar to the Game-Changing Attorney podcast or the Divorce Course podcast, where personal narratives collide with legal frameworks and critical moments of disclosure. Throughout the testimony, tension increases as conflicting accounts emerge. The mother insists she genuinely believed the man on the birth certificate was dead, claiming she heard this from someone related to him. But this explanation becomes increasingly unstable as more facts surface. The daughter listens to her mother's words with a mixture of disbelief and pain. She expresses how difficult it was to grow up without a father and how deeply the absence shaped her identity. She talks about passing the surname from her birth certificate to her own children, simply because it was the only connection she had. As Judge Lauren Lake questions the mother, the courtroom feels like the stage in a divorce case, where emotional wounds resurface and family dynamics are exposed under legal scrutiny. The mother tries to defend herself, explaining that she never intentionally misled her daughter, and that she had been told the man was dead when she was preparing to move back home years ago. But when asked for more details, her story becomes fragmented. This inconsistency raises the issue of adverse inference in Evidence Act principles. where unclear or contradictory explanations may suggest that the truth is being withheld or distorted. The daughter reveals that she attempted to find the man listed on her birth certificate when she became an adult. She searched through online databases, tracked down addresses and phone numbers, and tried to call, but every number was disconnected. These attempts left her frustrated and emotionally drained, making her eventually give up the search. Her testimony mirrors countless Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where people speak about the emotional recovery process after long-term trauma or unresolved family issues. As the proceedings continue, the man who believes he may be her biological father becomes visibly emotional. He talks about his search for her, the guilt he carries, and the hope he has held onto. He expresses regret for not being part of her life and becomes overwhelmed when describing how he recognized her resemblance to his other children. His emotions reflect the larger theme of people who take a DNA test and later regret taking it because of the unexpected family secrets it reveals. Here, the possibility of truth brings both hope and fear. Then, in a courtroom moment charged with intensity, Judge Lauren Lake announces that the man believed to be dead has actually been found alive. This revelation shifts the emotional temperature of the room instantly. Shock ripples across the daughter's face, followed by disbelief. Her understanding of her entire life changes in a single sentence. For more than 25 years, she mourned a man she never met, a man she believed she could never talk to, never ask questions, never see. Now she learns that not only is he alive, but he is on his way into the courtroom. When he enters, the atmosphere becomes heavier. He brings with him a framed picture he has kept for decades, a small child holding a teddy bear. The daughter is overcome. He explains that he has looked at the picture every night and never forgot her. His voice trembles, and the courtroom becomes suspended between the emotional power of reunion and the legal necessity of determining biological truth. Judge Lauren Lake shifts the tone back toward clarity. She emphasizes that despite the emotional significance of the reunion, paternity must still be established through proper evidence, highlighting again the delicate balance between emotional justice and legal truth. Both men were tested, as required by law. The daughter admits how confusing it was to grow up looking physically different from the man listed as her father, and from the man now claiming to be her father. She explains that her appearance caused her to doubt both narratives, especially since both men in question were African American, while she was often assumed to be of another ethnicity. This confusion extends into the broader concept of justice in jurisprudence, as personal identity intersects with legal identity, demonstrating that the law seeks objective truth while people often live inside subjective experiences of belonging and identity. Judge Lauren Lake reads the DNA results slowly, ensuring each moment is respected. The first man, the one who stepped forward to claim possible paternity, is proven not to be the biological father. The courtroom feels the sudden sting of disappointment on his behalf, as well as the heartbreak from the daughter who had hoped for a clear answer. The next result follows just moments later. The man on the birth certificate, the man believed dead, is also not the biological father. The room erupts emotionally. The daughter, already overwhelmed, now faces a third unknown possibility. Her biological father may be someone entirely different. The mother reluctantly admits that she had slept with another man, the supposed brother of the man from the birth certificate, creating yet another twist in the search for truth. She tries to defend her actions by emphasizing the circumstances and the pain she endured, but the disclosure releases a new wave of confusion. The situation exposes just how complex family histories can become when layered with secrecy, fear, and fragmented memories. Judge Lauren Lake encourages everyone to focus on truth instead of blame. She stresses that the law cannot change the past, but can help people navigate the future by grounding them in verified facts. Her approach resembles the guidance often heard in Truth Changes Everything podcast narratives, where people confront their past through honesty and accountability. The courtroom remains heavy with uncertainty as the first 1,500 words conclude, leaving the final results, emotional confrontations, and revelations for the next part. The courtroom feels heavier after the shocking DNA results, and Judge Lauren Lake takes a moment to acknowledge how emotionally overwhelming the revelations are. The daughter sits stiffly, trying to absorb the fact that the two men she believed could possibly be her father have both been ruled out. Her expression mirrors the emotional collapse of someone whose identity has been shaken at its foundation. Everything she thought she knew, every assumption, every explanation, every story she built her internal world around has shifted. For years she lived with one truth, only to discover that none of it was rooted in biological reality. Judge Lauren Lake leans forward, speaking with a mixture of empathy and firm guidance. She explains that the courtroom is not just a place for evidence, but also a place where families confront years of emotional debris. In her courtroom, truth is not simply a scientific result printed on paper. It is something that demands accountability and honesty. She reminds everyone that this is the kind of moment often explored in adoption stories, full episodes, cheating stories, and even the reflective discussions in the Divorce Course podcast, where personal and legal realities collide with emotional confessions. The man who believed he was the father wipes away tears. He expresses that despite the DNA results, he still feels a deep emotional connection. His voice cracks when he says that even if he is not biologically tied to her, he will not stop caring about her. For him, biology was never the only factor. The courtroom watches quietly as he tries to gather himself, grappling with both disappointment and admiration for the young woman whose life he hoped to be part of. His reaction represents the complex way some people respond to DNA test results, sometimes with relief, but often with regret, confusion, or unexpected emotional turmoil. Many people in similar situations later say they regret taking a DNA test, not because the science is wrong, but because the truth exposes wounds they were unprepared to face. The man from the birth certificate, who had carried her childhood photo for more than 20 years, also absorbs the news with difficulty. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges him directly, thanking him for his honesty and for preserving the picture all these years. Yet she must guide the courtroom back to clarity. Emotional devotion does not override factual evidence. She speaks about how courtrooms must separate emotional narratives from legal conclusions, a principle deeply rooted in the concept of justice in jurisprudence. Feeling like a father is not the same as being proven to be one, and legal identity must be grounded in certainty, especially for matters involving family, inheritance, or future support. This moment in court mirrors the type of conversations heard in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal professionals talk about how law often forces people to confront the truths they avoided outside the courtroom. In this case, Judge Lake emphasizes that the legal truth reveals a greater responsibility. The responsibility to move forward honestly, acknowledging all possibilities and confronting long-hidden actions. The daughter's mother, now visibly shaken, begins to explain again how she came to believe the man on the birth certificate was dead. But her explanations are no longer convincing. Judge Lauren Lake gently but firmly points out the inconsistencies. She clarifies that the situation now involves not only emotional consequences, but also principles that resemble adverse inference in evidence act logic, meaning that when a person cannot provide a clear or consistent explanation, the law may reasonably infer that critical information is being omitted or distorted. The daughter interrupts, voicing years of hurt. She describes how she blamed herself for her father's absence, thinking she must have done something wrong or that she simply wasn't enough for him to stay. Her childhood was filled with unanswered questions, confusion about identity, and a longing for stability. She explains how she made sure her children always had their father in their lives, because she never wanted them to grow up wondering why one parent didn't care. Her voice trembles as she recounts how she used to imagine what her father looked like, or what he might have said if he had been there. Judge Lauren Lake guides her gently through these emotions. She explains that what the daughter experienced is extremely common among children raised with uncertain parentage. In podcasts like Truth Changes Everything, such emotional testimonies reveal how deeply unresolved histories affect generations. Children often internalize abandonment, turning it into a personal wound even when they are not at fault. When the mother finally admits that she had been with another man, possibly the brother of the man on the birth certificate, the courtroom shifts again. Judge Lauren Lake's posture becomes more serious, and she stresses the importance of being transparent. She explains that when legal decisions rely heavily on timelines, sexual history, and overlapping relationships, hiding information only delays justice. She further explains that withholding key facts creates legal confusion and emotional chaos, both of which could have been avoided. The mother attempts to clarify that the situation was complicated. She describes her relationship at the time, her emotional struggles, and the instability she faced. But the judge gently interrupts, reminding her that the relationship between law and justice requires both sides of a story to be evaluated without emotional fog. The court must examine what happened factually, not what someone wishes had happened. She also stresses that misleading others about parentage carries long-term emotional consequences for children, echoing themes usually heard in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals describe overcoming the guilt and shame tied to decisions made under stress or fear. The daughter's reaction intensifies. She struggles to process the idea that her mother may have known there was another possible father, but chose not to mention it earlier. She becomes overwhelmed by the thought that her entire life was built on incomplete or inaccurate information. The uncertainty leaves her emotionally destabilized. She describes it as feeling like walking down a never-ending hallway without light, a metaphor she uses to capture the emptiness she felt during her childhood. Judge Lauren Lake highlights the necessity of uncovering the truth not just for the daughter, but for any children she might have in the future. Legal identity influences medical history, inheritance rights, emotional stability, and the sense of belonging. This is why paternity cases often appear on discussions in the Divorce Course podcast, where experts explain why proper documentation and accurate information prevent long-term legal complications. The mother faces scrutiny from both men present. The man from the birth certificate expresses confusion about how false information regarding his supposed death spread for decades. He insists that he never disappeared, was never killed, and that no one in his family ever reported such a thing. For him, the entire situation feels like an unfair distortion of his life story. His frustration reflects what many people experience when misinformation spreads through families, especially when combined with silence, distance, or emotional conflict. Judge Lake emphasizes that the court cannot rely on assumptions or hearsay. She brings the focus back to the present, identifying the truth so that the daughter can finally have clarity. She warns the mother that the court will require full transparency moving forward. She advises her to take responsibility for the decisions of the past so her daughter can begin healing. This moment feels similar to moments from Adoption Story's full episodes, where individuals confront their biological origins and navigate complex emotional reactions. The daughter expresses that although the DNA results were shocking, she appreciates that the truth is finally coming out. She says that the experience feels both painful and strangely liberating. The concept of finally having concrete answers, even if incomplete, represents a kind of emotional release she never experienced before. She acknowledges that the next steps may involve more testing or more searching, but at least she is no longer trapped in uncertainty. Judge Lauren Lake summarizes the situation again, pointing out how family secrets tend to grow more damaging the longer they remain hidden. She encourages everyone in the room to understand that accountability must replace denial. She speaks about how justice in these cases doesn't simply come from biological facts, but also from emotional honesty and shared responsibility. She mentions that in legal discussions on podcasts like the Game Changing Attorney podcast, attorneys often explain how truth is the foundation for rebuilding trust after long-term deception. The courtroom atmosphere remains strained as the mother is pressed further. She insists she is not lying, but admits she kept certain details to herself. Judge Lauren Lake tells her plainly that withholding information is a form of emotional harm, not only to the child, but also to any potential fathers who may have been denied the chance to raise their child. This principle aligns with broader themes in family law, where the court continuously upholds the importance of clarity, responsibility, and proper documentation. By the end of the second 1,500 words, the courtroom remains filled with unanswered questions and emotional weight. Judge Lake prepares everyone for the remaining legal analysis and the emotional aftermath that will follow. As the courtroom moves into the final phase of the hearing, Judge Lauren Lake gathers everyone's attention with a calm but authoritative presence. She knows that what comes next is not just about determining biological truth. It is about helping a fractured family navigate the consequences of long-hidden choices. The daughter sits quietly, her hands trembling slightly, but she keeps listening, determined to hear everything with clarity. She wants answers, even if those answers come with pain. Judge Lake addresses the mother first. She explains that in legal settings, whether family court, child support rulings, or even Supreme Court child support cases, truth must always take precedence, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. The judge stresses that when people hide critical information, they create instability not just for themselves but for everyone involved. She compares this to the legal principle found in adverse inference in Evidence Act discussions. When a person provides incomplete, inconsistent, or evasive information, the law is allowed to assume that the missing truth may weaken their position. The mother takes a deep breath and admits that she made mistakes. She begins describing the emotional and financial pressure she experienced years ago, how her relationships were unstable, and how the circumstances around her daughter's conception were complicated. She insists that she never intentionally tried to hurt her daughter. Instead, she thought she was protecting her from pain. But Judge Lauren Lake makes it very clear. Protecting someone with inaccurate information eventually becomes a new source of pain, even if the original intention was different. The courtroom listens silently as Judge Lake talks about how common it is for parents to hide parts of their past. Whether in cheating stories, complicated custody battles, or emotionally charged moments discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, people often avoid telling the full truth because they fear judgment or repercussions. But hiding the truth only postpones the emotional collapse, and when that collapse finally happens, it is far more painful. The daughter nods slowly. She admits that hearing her mother's honesty now feels both relieving and heartbreaking. She says she wishes her mother had trusted her enough to share the truth earlier, even if it was messy. Her voice softens as she explains that she doesn't necessarily want to punish her mother. She just wants to finally understand who she is, where she came from, and what parts of her life were shaped by secrets she never knew existed. Judge Lake acknowledges this and explains that identity plays a crucial role in emotional stability. She mentions that court systems, including those discussed on the Game Changing Attorney podcast, continually emphasize how crucial accurate family history is, not only for childhood development but also for legal rights, medical records, and inheritance matters. The judge highlights that when truth is delayed, children often grow up feeling incomplete, much like the daughter described earlier. Then the focus shifts to the two men who were tested. Both of them remain deeply impacted by the results. The man who held her photograph for decades seems devastated, not because he was proven not to be the father, but because he realized that he missed out on raising a child he deeply cared about regardless of biology. Judge Lake acknowledges his emotional journey and reminds him that love is not measured solely by DNA. She explains that many people learn through Celebrate Recovery testimonies and similar experiences, that emotional bonds can sometimes matter just as much as biological ones. The other man, who believed he might have fathered her based on past relationships, also appears emotional. He expresses sorrow that he could